Hey, we have a lot to do this week. We want to look at our text in Genesis chapter 20, the story of Abraham and King Abimelech. We're going to look over the next 4 weeks, this last week and the next 3 weeks, at four stories about Abraham, and there's a pattern that's going to take place. And we're going to see in the first story, broken trust between two chieftains. The second story, we're going to see broken trust between two wives, Hagar and Sarah. The third story, we're going to see restored trust between Abraham and Abimelech, the two chieftains, through a covenant. And in the fourth story, we're going to see God's promised covenant being the thing that restores trust and character in Abraham and Sarah in their life. So we're excited about this week and all that we're going to look at as we kind of dig into it. Part of what we want to notice and recognize is that all the way through Genesis, there is in this book of beginnings, Bereshith, one word that is translated into 3 words, in the beginning, the first word in the Bible, this book of beginnings, we're going to see pattern after pattern after pattern show up. Good patterns, bad patterns. And as we do, any one of us could say, Deja vu. I think I've been here before. And the truth is, yes, we are. It's exactly what the biblical authors want us to do. They want us to recognize the patterns. Remember in our rules of the road, rule number 4, that the Bible must be read with an understanding of literature and knowing that words create repeated themes and patterns that drive the biblical message. So when we begin to recognize those, we're going to bump into those and goes, I've been here before. And that's going to remind us of beautiful things. 2 major things go all the way through Genesis, in fact, throughout the whole scriptures, that we see kind of really come to the surface in Genesis. One is God's promise, that God is a God that makes promises. Someone has calculated, and they think there's probably close to 400 promises in the Bible. God's promises are wonderful. And there's a principle. And the principle is this: where God's promises are, He provides protection. Where God's promises are, He provides protection. In other words, if God promises something, He's going to bring the protection to see that that promise comes to fulfillment. The second principle is around God's purposes. Where God's purposes are, He brings correction. Where God's purposes are, He brings correction. We see both of these taking place in the stories that we're going to look at over the next few weeks. It's important for us because the promise that God made to Abraham, that promise continues all the way into the New Testament and is there for us. In other words, God fulfilled His promise to Abraham, and it's what brings us into the family of God, the family of Abraham. So Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham, and we're some of them. We're part of His promised blessing that comes through Abraham. We get to receive that because God protected it through all the centuries and brings it to us. God's purposes were also true in Abraham's life. From the moment Abraham hears the voice of God, God declares His purposes. Purposes for him to be fruitful, for him to multiply, for him to be blessed. Purposes that will only be realized as Abraham is able to experience and adjust because of God's provided correction. This is also true for us, that you and I get to access God's purposes. We get to partner with God whenever we are receptive to His correction. We're talking about that all week long. Please join me tomorrow. Today, think about and count yourself blessed that God's promised blessing to Abraham is brought to us through the person of Jesus, the seed of Abraham, indeed the seed of the woman in the Eden narrative. That seed, that serpent crusher, came and he crushed the power of sin so you and I could have a relationship with Him. Lord Jesus, empower us today to live in Your promises and to live out Your purposes. I'll see you tomorrow.